On July 1st, 2025, the sky delivered something unfamiliar. A faint blur appeared on NASA's nightly feed, crossing the field of the ATLAS telescope in Chile. It wasn't a regular comet or asteroid. The readings showed a pattern that broke orbital logic. The signal moved faster than any object bound to our sun. Its curve, pulled from tracking data, looked wrong. The more analysts plotted it, the more they realized what it meant. By the end of that week, confirmation came from the Minor Planet Center. The object's eccentricity measured above 1.01, the hard mathematical line between what belongs to the solar system and what doesn't. Every planet, asteroid, and comet moves on an ellipse. This one didn't. It was flying in on a hyperbolic arc, the signature of something unbound. NASA labeled it 3I/Atlas, the third interstellar object in recorded history. Its velocity stunned everyone watching, 58 kilometers per second. For comparison, Mercury circles the Sun at 48. Nothing native moves that fast. Size estimates suggested something comparable to Manhattan Island. Early radar and albedo readings placed its mass around 33 billion tons. Too heavy, too large, and too steady to be dust or debris. It wasn't captured. It was passing through. Archival frames from June 14th to June 29th showed faint traces of the same body hidden among star clusters near the galactic center. It had been there the whole time, disguised in brightness. Only after recalibrating could astronomers see its trail. Its motion drew a long curve toward the inner system, cutting through the plane of the planets like a knife. At first, it drew quiet fascination. Oumuamua had flashed by 8 years earlier. Borisov followed 2 years later. Both changed astronomy. But 3I/Atlas was different, larger, faster, and already venting gas while still hundreds of millions of kilometers away. The excitement spread across research teams from Hawaii to Madrid. Then came the storm. On September 25th, at precisely 9:32 UTC, the Sun released a burst of plasma powerful enough to light an entire hemisphere of space. A coronal mass ejection expanded outward, carrying over 10 to the 24th joules of kinetic energy. That's roughly 1 million times the energy of the Tsar Bomba detonation, the largest ever created by humans. Propagation models from SOHO and STEREO satellites predicted a near-perfect collision course with the path of 3I/Atlas. The margin of error was less than half a degree. As the solar plasma traveled through space, it accelerated, reaching nearly 1,000 kilometers per second. Hours later, the impact occurred. Heliospheric monitors spiked. Proton density multiplied tenfold. Magnetic fields around the object jumped from 7 nanoteslas to over 40. The data streamed in unbroken sequences, timestamps, intensities, trajectories. The collision wasn't an assumption. It was logged across instruments from 2 spacecraft and multiple ground observatories. For astronomers, it was a moment of awe and unease. The comet's coma ballooned to over 26,000 kilometers, twice Earth's diameter. Infrared imaging showed a cloud dominated by carbon dioxide instead of water, a ratio of 7.6 to 1 unheard of in local comets. JWST's spectrometers confirmed a carbon envelope stretching 348,000 kilometers, almost the distance between Earth and the Moon. Plasma density around the nucleus reached 500 protons per cubic centimeter, 50 times normal solar wind levels. In those minutes, the interstellar object became a laboratory. Telescopes across both hemispheres captured the same surge. Instruments recorded brightness flickers and field twists. Every variable was archived with precision, velocity, density, orientation. Scientists called it a once-in-a-decade solar eruption, meeting a once-in-a-lifetime visitor. What no one expected was what followed on Earth. At 10:16 a.m. local time in Venezuela, seismographs at the Funvises Center in El Tigre began to scream. The trace line leapt violently. Magnitude 6.2. Sirens blared. 3 hours later, another quake struck, 6.3. Windows shattered, bridges cracked, water lines burst. By the afternoon, a 5.8 aftershock followed, sending people back into the streets. For a region that hadn't seen a sequence like this in 25 years, it felt unreal. In control rooms, operators compared timestamps. The CME comet collision occurred less than 5 hours earlier. It was a coincidence, perhaps, but too precise to ignore. Reports from the field described what locals called a weight pressing down from the sky. Power grids flickered, hospitals overflowed. The strongest tremors since the year 2000 were unfolding in a single day. At nearly the same moment, another kind of alarm sounded. At 0512 UTC, orbiting gamma-ray detectors caught a massive burst from the southern constellations. The Fermi telescope registered the first signal from Norma. Minutes later, Swift picked up a second from Ara. 2 separate nova explosions, each a white dwarf reigniting in a blast of hydrogen fusion, flashed across the galaxy. Both became visible to the naked eye from Chile and the Australian desert. Astronomical networks scrambled. The double nova event was unprecedented, 2 visible eruptions from the same hemisphere within 30 minutes. Photometric stations plotted light curves, while spectrographs at Cerro Tololo and Siding Spring traced the expanding shells of ionized hydrogen. Their readings showed bright emission lines from newly forged nickel, confirming the explosions were fresh and nearby in galactic terms. By dawn, the data streams overlapped. One timeline recorded the CME impact on 3 I/Atlas at 9:32 UTC. Another marked the Venezuelan quakes hours later. A third logged the twin nova bursts in near-perfect synchronization. No model connected them, yet the pattern was undeniable. 3 separate systems, solar, terrestrial, and stellar, had flared within a single rotation of Earth. For seismologists, the coincidence was mathematical noise. For astronomers, it was a signal. Social networks filled with overlays of seismic maps and space weather charts. Independent researchers aligned the CME's path with magnetic flux variations measured by the DSC-OVR probe near Earth's orbit. Some claimed the shock wave passing through interplanetary space might have disturbed our magnetosphere just enough to release stored tectonic stress. Others dismissed the idea outright. Still, the timing continued to bother everyone tracking the data. The comet's coma remained unstable, swelling and collapsing in intervals. Plasma jets erupted, twisting along invisible magnetic fields. Its carbon emissions pulsed like a living thing. Each outburst triggered a brightness surge across optical feeds. Space physicists watching the graphs called it behavior without precedent. In observatories from Arizona to Lucia, time-lapse images revealed strange flickers in the tail. It would bend toward the sun for hours, then snap back outward. Even the best simulations using CME-driven turbulence failed to reproduce it. Dust grain modeling didn't fit. Ion flow modeling didn't fit. The comet defied its own physics. For the public, the story grew fast. News channels replayed the earthquake footage alongside solar storm animations. Commentators spoke of cosmic coincidence. Viewers called it proof of connection. The phrase, "when the sky and ground moved together," started trending. Inside NASA, the language stayed careful. No correlation. No danger. The agency reminded everyone that 3I/Atlas was still more than 170 million kilometers away and posed no physical threat. But the numbers told a more complex story, one of timing, power, and geometry. The Sun had hit an alien body exactly as Earth and Mars moved through the same alignment corridor. Minutes later, the ground itself trembled and two distant stars detonated. By early October, the data made less sense with every new file. Instruments from the James Webb Space Telescope continued to send infrared spectra that refused to fit any known category. The CO2 to water ratio stood at 7.6 to 1. Every other comet in the solar system stayed near 1 to 1. Astronomers rechecked calibration, confirmed instrument alignment, and ran control tests on archived data. Nothing changed. The readings were real. Inside the coma, new signatures appeared. Cyanide lines glowed faintly in ultraviolet. Atomic nickel emissions replaced the iron lines normally seen in dust and vapor. The chemistry belonged to no catalog. It wasn't contaminated, and it wasn't an error. Each dataset confirmed the same composition. Analysts started calling it an alien fingerprint, a term meant only to describe its unearthly ratios, yet the phrase began to spread far beyond the labs. The plasma density around the object pulsed every hour. Jets erupted from the nucleus, carving channels through the surrounding gas. Brightness spiked and fell with each discharge, twisting the long tail behind it. On heliospheric charts, the oscillations formed repeating peaks. The object seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting like a system under pressure. Subscribe and share this. Each new pulse from 3I Atlas is changing what we know about the sky. The Very Large Telescope and Gemini observatories delivered opposite results. In the south, ultraviolet images showed a tail streaming away from the sun. In the north, infrared and radio instruments plotted the tail, bending sharply toward it. The contradiction split the data teams in half. Some blamed viewing angles. Others blamed magnetism. Neither side could make the geometry hold. The European Southern Observatory ran full plasma simulations injecting magnetic turbulence from the earlier coronal mass ejection. Even at extreme parameters, the model couldn't reproduce a tail that flipped direction within hours. The field reversals defied known solar wind physics. Every time the comet brightened, the tail seemed to pivot again. Cameras caught it swinging back and forth like a slow pendulum of ionized dust. The readings were cross-checked against calibration stars. No errors appeared. The phenomenon was genuine. At the same time, the Mars orbiters awaited. October 3rd marked the moment of closest passage, about 30 million kilometers from the planet. For the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, it was a rare chance to image an interstellar object at close range. Engineers uploaded commands to the HiRISE camera, fine-tuning its exposure to achieve 30-kilometer resolution per pixel. The Perseverance rover prepared to capture the same object from the surface sky, linking its navigation cameras with orbital timing. Then the signals stopped. Public data from NASA's servers froze after October 2nd. By October 5th, all live streams went offline. The official explanation cited a government shutdown that halted synchronization between spacecraft and ground systems. Still, the timing was too perfect. The moment the object reached its prime visibility window, every American feed vanished. European assets stayed online. The Mars Express probe continued imaging quietly. Independent observatories in Australia and Japan picked up radio echoes consistent with the object's predicted position. Yet, without the U.S. streams, the public saw only fragments. Avi Loeb, the Harvard astrophysicist leading multiple review teams, released a blog post explaining the most viral image of the week. The Perseverance camera had photographed what looked like a long metallic rod. Social media declared it proof of structure. Loeb explained it differently. The shape, he said, was an effect of exposure stacking. The camera tracked the comet across multiple frames, smearing its image while stars blurred in the opposite direction. He called it an artifact of timing, not of design. Even so, another image complicated everything. An independent astronomer, known online as Dobsonia, used a high-aperture telescope to photograph 3I Atlas from Earth. His first results showed the same elongated form. Believing it was a sensor artifact, he disassembled and cleaned his optics, recalibrated alignment, and imaged again the next night. The streak remained, cleaner, sharper, and now visibly rotated. The object hadn't shifted position relative to Mars, yet the angle of its tail changed upward. The motion suggested rotation without translation, a slow spin in place. Dobsonia uploaded his cleaned footage, pointing out what looked like a stingray-shaped tail. Viewers compared his frames with NASA's earlier data, noting similar brightness contours. The pattern spread fast. Claims that the interstellar object had stopped near Mars. For the next 48 hours, speculation became constant noise. Some insisted the shift was due to internal jets firing intermittently. Others claimed mechanical movement. The phrase "halted object" trended across astronomy forums. To most professionals, it was simply data awaiting verification. But to millions watching the live feeds disappear, it sounded like something hidden. Avi Loeb continued releasing his findings through interviews. He repeated the measured facts: 7 confirmed anomalies that separated 3I Atlas from any known comet. Its mass, roughly 33 billion tons. A jet pointing toward the sun, not away. A body made mostly of nickel without iron. Polarized light never before observed in cometary tails. A trajectory aligned with the solar system's plane. Arrival timed within days of Mars, Jupiter, and Venus alignments. And the approach direction tracing back toward the coordinates of the 1977 WOW signal in Sagittarius. Reporters asked him if this meant it was artificial. He said no, only that nature had never produced anything quite like it. On a scale from 0 to 10, where 10 meant definite technology, he placed it at 4. Unusual, he said, but not proof of design. During the same broadcast, U.S. Congressman Tim Burchett joined him. The discussion drifted from astrophysics to national secrecy. Burchett mentioned that naval officers had tracked unidentified objects under the ocean moving close to 200 miles per hour, faster than any known craft. He described them as the size of football fields and operating in deep water zones that science barely explored. He linked them loosely to Avi Loeb's earlier recovery of metallic fragments from the Pacific, believed to be of interstellar origin. Their exchange reignited every forum. Viewers combined clips of the halted Mars feeds with Burchett's comments about deep-water anomalies. Scientists pushed back, reminding the public that 3I Atlas was still 170 million kilometers from Earth and posed no threat. But the silence from NASA's servers lingered. European stations continued posting telemetry. The comet still glowed faintly, still rotated, still emitted its erratic nickel lines. No data confirmed motion halting, Yet no data disproved it either. As days passed, only partial updates arrived through ESA's Mars Express and a few independent